December 20th, 1943. 23,000 feet above Rabaul Harbor, New Britain. Captain Michael Sullivan grips the control yoke of his B-17F Flying Fortress, call sign Devil's Chariot, as his bombardier lines up the final approach. Through the plexiglass nose, Sullivan watches black puffs of anti-aircraft fire bloom across the sky. His 10-man crew has survived 14 missions over the most heavily defended target in the Southwest Pacific. But what happens in the next 8 minutes will test every lesson they've learned about survival in the merciless air war against Japan. Navigator Lieutenant David Chen calls out altitude and airspeed while crouched in the confined space behind the cockpit. In the cramped nose compartment below, Bombardier Second Lieutenant James Martinez peers through his Norden bombsight, making microscopic adjustments as the Japanese harbor facilities crawl into the crosshairs. The formation of 12 B-17s maintains tight discipline, each fortress positioned to provide overlapping fields of defensive fire. Then Martinez sees them. 6 aircraft approaching head-on, climbing through the bomber formation's altitude with aggressive intent. The twin-engine silhouettes resolve into Nakajima Ki-45 Toryu fighters, what Allied intelligence calls NIC. These specialized interceptors have been specifically configured for one purpose: destroying American heavy bombers through frontal assault. Each mounts a 37mm cannon in the nose, supplemented by 2 12.7mm heavy machine guns, creating a weapons package designed to shred bomber cockpits and flight decks in a single devastating pass. Martinez reaches for his single flexible Browning machine gun mounted in the nose, knowing with sick certainty that his manual aiming against fighters closing at a combined speed exceeding 500 miles per hour gives him perhaps 2 seconds of firing opportunity. The mathematics are brutal and unforgiving. But Captain Sullivan's B-17 carries something that Japanese pilots racing toward them have never encountered before. Something that will fundamentally alter the tactical calculus of Pacific air combat and render obsolete the frontal attack doctrine that Japanese interceptor crews have perfected over 2 years of combat. What unfolds in the next 90 seconds will demonstrate why a seemingly simple modification, the addition of a chin-mounted gun turret beneath the B-17's nose, would prove as revolutionary to bomber defense as radar or the Norden bombsight. The technological innovation about to be tested in the crucible of combat over Rabaul will transform Japanese frontal attacks from calculated tactical maneuvers into suicidal ventures, forcing a complete reassessment of interceptor doctrine and contributing significantly to Allied air superiority in the Pacific theater. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The Boeing B-17 Flying Fortress entered service with the United States Army Air Corps in 1938, representing the pinnacle of American strategic bombing theory. The aircraft's designation reflected the military's vision of an aerial weapon platform so heavily armed it could defend itself against fighter attack, penetrating deep into enemy territory without escort. Early models, the B-17B through B-17E, mounted defensive armament in various configurations, but all shared a critical vulnerability that Japanese fighter tacticians would ruthlessly exploit. The nose section of these early flying fortresses presented a tactical paradox. While the bombardier required unobstructed forward visibility for accurate bomb delivery, this same requirement created minimal defensive firepower in the forward hemisphere. The B-17E model, which equipped most 8th Air Force units arriving in England during 1942 and 5th Air Force squadrons deploying to the Southwest Pacific, mounted a single manually operated Browning M2 machine gun in the nose compartment. This weapon, fired by the bombardier, provided theoretical forward defense but suffered from severe practical limitations. The bombardier, whose primary responsibility involved precision navigation to the target and operation of the complex Norden bombsight, could not simultaneously manage bomb release calculations and effective gunnery against maneuvering fighters. The single gun offered limited traverse angles, perhaps 30 degrees left, 20 degrees up and down. Most critically, accurate aiming required the bombardier to manually track fighters approaching at closure rates exceeding 400 knots, while accounting for deflection angles, relative motion, and the bomber's own flight path. Combat experience quickly demonstrated that this arrangement provided psychological comfort rather than effective defense. The B-17F model, introduced in mid-1942, attempted to address forward defense through incremental improvements. Boeing added cheek guns, single manually operated weapons mounted in the left and right sides of the nose compartment, each manned by either the bombardier or navigator. This configuration increased the total number of forward-firing weapons to 3, but all remained manually aimed, handheld weapons requiring the operator to brace against the aircraft's movement while tracking high-speed targets. The improvement was marginal at best. Technical specifications revealed the challenge faced by bombardiers attempting forward defense. The Browning M2 machine gun, chambered for the powerful 50 caliber round, generated significant recoil. Each weapon weighed 84 pounds unloaded, increasing to over 100 pounds with ammunition belt attached. Firing rate reached approximately 800 rounds per minute. But controlling this weapon while standing in the cramped, unpressurized nose compartment at 25,000 feet, wearing bulky heated flight suits and oxygen masks, proved extraordinarily difficult. The weapon's effective range against fighters exceeded 1,000 yards, but achieving hits on maneuvering targets at that distance through manual aiming was largely a matter of chance rather than skill. Japanese fighter tacticians, studying American bomber formations throughout 1942 and early 1943, identified the forward vulnerability with clinical precision. Intelligence officers compiled detailed reports on B-17 defensive capabilities, noting the concentration of defensive firepower toward the rear and flanks. The tail position mounted twin 50 caliber guns in a powered turret. The dorsal position featured another twin-gun powered turret. Ball turret gunners beneath the fuselage commanded twin 50s with 360-degree traverse. But the nose, that critical forward sector, remained defended only by manually aimed weapons operated by crew members whose primary duties lay elsewhere. Major Takeshi Nakamura of the Imperial Japanese Army Air Force 68th Suntai compiled a tactical analysis in January 1943 that would shape Japanese interceptor doctrine for the coming year. His report, discovered in captured documents after the war, stated with remarkable clarity the vulnerability his pilots would exploit. The American heavy bomber concentrates defensive fire to the rear quadrants. Tail attacks, while offering favorable geometry, expose our fighters to maximum defensive firepower. Beam attacks distribute our formation and reduce concentration of fire. The forward approach, despite higher closure rates, presents minimal defensive capability. Bombardiers cannot effectively aim handheld weapons during the critical bombing run. We must attack head-on with maximum aggression, accepting the brief window of mutual vulnerability to destroy the bomber before it can release ordnance. This doctrine shaped the development and deployment of specialized interceptor aircraft and tactics throughout Japanese-controlled territory. The Nakajima Ki-45 Toryu emerged as a purpose-built bomber destroyer, though its development had begun before the Pacific War as a long-range escort fighter. Combat experience quickly demonstrated the aircraft's unsuitability for that role, but its twin-engine configuration and substantial size made it ideal for heavy armament installation. Engineers mounted a 37mm HO-23 cannon through the nose, supplemented by two 12.7mm HO-10-3 heavy machine guns in the upper fuselage. Some variants carried a 37mm cannon in an oblique mounting, angled upward at 70 degrees for attacks from below. The 37mm cannon represented formidable firepower. Each high-explosive round weighed 1.65 pounds and could penetrate significant armor protection. A single hit on a bomber's cockpit, engines, or wing root could prove catastrophic.
Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now, back to the story. The weapon's rate of fire, approximately 120 rounds per minute, seemed modest compared to machine guns, but the destructive power of each projectile made up for slower cycling. Ki-45 pilots received specific training in frontal attack geometry, learning to open fire at 800 meters and maintain their approach until breaking away at 300 meters, accepting the dangerous closure to ensure maximum hit probability. The Kawasaki Ki-61 Hien, known to Allied intelligence as Tony, provided another frontal attack platform. This sleek, modern fighter mounted two 12.7mm machine guns in the cowling and two 20mm cannons in the wings. Japanese pilots praised its speed and climbing ability, though reliability issues with the licensed German Daimler-Benz engine plagued operations. Against B-17 formations, Ki-61 pilots employed similar frontal attack tactics, often approaching in loose pairs to divide the bomber's defensive fire. The Mitsubishi Ki-46, designated Dyna by Allied forces, served primarily as a reconnaissance aircraft, but saw limited use in bomber interception when modified with forward-firing armament. Its exceptional speed and high-altitude performance made it difficult for bomber gunners to track, though its light armament limited effectiveness. More commonly, standard Japanese fighters, including the Nakajima Ki-43 Hayabusa and Ki-84 Hayate, engaged bombers from frontal quarters, accepting their lighter armament as a trade-off for better maneuverability. Japanese pilots developed elaborate tactics for frontal attacks. The standard approach involved climbing to an altitude several thousand feet above the bomber formation, then diving to build speed while establishing the attack angle. Fighters approached in loose formations, typically 4 to 6 aircraft, timed to arrive simultaneously to overwhelm defensive fire. The lead aircraft targeted the leftmost bomber in the formation. Successive fighters engage aircraft to the right, ensuring each bomber faced at least one attacker. At closure ranges exceeding 500 knots combined speed, the engagement window lasted perhaps 3 seconds. Pilots opened fire between 800 and 600 meters, walked their fire into the target as range decreased, then broke hard downward or to the side at 300 meters to avoid collision. This doctrine achieved devastating results throughout 1942 and into 1943. Mission reports from 5th Air Force B-17 units operating from Port Moresby against targets in New Guinea and New Britain documented alarming loss rates. On January 5, 1943, 6 B-17s attacked Japanese shipping at Rabaul. Frontal attacks by Ki-45s and Ki-61s destroyed 2 bombers, killing 20 crewmen, and severely damaged 2 others. The mission achieved minimal results against the target while losing 1/3 of the attacking force. On March 2, 8 B-17s struck airfields at Leh. Coordinated frontal attacks destroyed 3 aircraft, with 1 exploding in midair after a 37mm shell detonated its bomb load. Surviving crews reported feeling helpless against the frontal approach, their nose guns ineffective against the high-speed attackers. Squadron commanders filed urgent requests for improved forward defensive armament. Major Harold Watson, commanding the 43rd Bombardment Group, wrote in an after-action report dated March 15, 1943, that frontal attacks have become the primary threat to our operations. Japanese fighters show no hesitation in pressing attacks from 12 o'clock high, knowing our forward defensive fire is inadequate. We have lost highly experienced crews who survived the European theater only to be killed over the Pacific. Our bombardiers and navigators do their utmost with the available weapons, but manual aiming against high-speed targets proves nearly impossible. We require powered defensive armament in the forward sector if we are to continue deep penetration missions without prohibitive losses. These reports reached 5th Air Force Headquarters in Brisbane, where staff officers compiled casualty statistics that painted a grim picture. Analysis of combat losses from November 1942 through March 1943 revealed that 68% of B-17s destroyed by fighter attack had been hit primarily from frontal approaches. Another 15% showed combined frontal and beam attack damage. Only 17% had been destroyed primarily through tail or beam attacks. The conclusion was inescapable. Japanese fighter tactics had identified and exploited a fundamental vulnerability in Flying Fortress defensive design. Parallel developments in the European theater reinforced these findings. 8th Air Force B-17 units conducting daylight strategic bombing over Germany faced similar frontal attacks from Luftwaffe fighters. FW-190 and Bf-109 pilots, like their Japanese counterparts, recognized the bomber's weak forward defense. German fighter tacticians developed their own frontal attack doctrine, approaching in line abreast formations at high speed, concentrating fire on the lead bombers to disrupt formation integrity. The battle over Schweinfurt on October 14, 1943, would demonstrate the devastating effectiveness of massed frontal attacks, with 8th Air Force losing 60 B-17s, many destroyed by head-on passes. The solution emerged from field modifications and engineering analysis conducted simultaneously in multiple theaters. In England, maintenance crews at several 8th Air Force bases experimented with installing additional forward-firing weapons. Some aircraft received extra cheek guns, increasing the total to 5 manually operated weapons in the nose. Others mounted weapons in improvised positions below the nose, handheld by the bombardier while lying prone. These modifications showed promise but remained fundamentally limited by manual operations. Boeing engineering teams in Seattle, receiving urgent requests from combat theaters, developed a more comprehensive solution. The answer lay in applying proven technology from other positions to the forward sector. Powered turrets mounting twin 50 caliber machine guns already defended the tail, dorsal, and ventral positions. Extending this concept to the nose required solving several engineering challenges. The bombardier required unobstructed forward visibility for the Norden bombsight during the bomb run. The nose compartment's limited space could not accommodate a full turret without compromising crew positions. Weight distribution required careful management to avoid affecting the aircraft's center of gravity and handling characteristics. The resulting design, designated the Bendix chin turret, represented an elegant compromise between defensive firepower and operational requirements. Engineers positioned the turret beneath the nose, forward of the bombardier's position, where it provided unobstructed forward fields of fire without blocking visibility through the nose glazing. The installation consisted of a rotating turret housing mounting twin Browning M2 50 caliber machine guns with provision for 800 rounds of ammunition, 400 per gun. The turret offered 170 degrees of traverse side to side and 85 degrees of elevation, covering the entire forward hemisphere except a small cone directly above the nose. Remote control allowed operation by either the bombardier or navigator from positions inside the pressurized nose compartment. The gunner tracked targets through a computing sight that automatically calculated deflection angles based on target range, speed, and bearing. Hydraulic power, tapped from the aircraft's existing system, rotated the turret and elevated the guns, eliminating the physical strain of manual aiming. The design incorporated a safety interlock, preventing the guns from firing when pointed at the aircraft's own propellers or structure. Total weight of the complete installation reached approximately 250 pounds, including guns, turret mechanism, ammunition, and control systems. Boeing designated the modified aircraft the B-17G model, with the chin turret as its defining feature. Production began at Boeing's Seattle plant in July 1943, with additional manufacturing at Douglas's Long Beach facility and Vega's Burbank plant. The first production B-17Gs rolled off assembly lines in September 1943, including not only the chin turret but other improvements, including staggered waist gun positions to reduce crew interference and enclosed waist gun positions providing better protection for gunners. Production priorities reflected the urgency of combat needs. 5th Air Force in the Southwest Pacific received early deliveries of B-17G aircraft beginning in October 1943, with the 43rd Bombardment Group being among the first units to transition.
European theater units followed closely, with 8th Air Force groups receiving their first chin turret-equipped fortresses in November. By December 1943, approximately 300 B-17G models had reached operational units worldwide, with production accelerating monthly. Boeing's 3 manufacturing facilities collectively produced over 8,000 B-17G aircraft by war's end, making it the most numerous variant of the Flying Fortress. The tactical impact manifested immediately in combat operations. Lieutenant Richard Brennan, bombardier aboard Memphis Belle II of the 43rd Bombardment Group, experienced his first engagement with the Chen turret during a mission to Rabaul on November 8, 1943. His after-action report provides remarkable detail about the weapon's effectiveness. "We were approaching the target when I spotted 4 Ki-45s positioning for a frontal attack from 11 o'clock high. In previous missions with the older model, I would have grabbed the manual nose gun and hoped for a lucky shot. This time, I simply activated the Chen turret, aligned the computing sight on the lead fighter, and opened fire at 900 yards. The twin 50s generated a visible stream of tracers that adjusted automatically as I tracked the target. The lead Ki-45 broke away trailing smoke before reaching effective firing range. His wingman continued the approach, but my sustained fire forced him to break off at 600 yards without firing his cannon. The remaining 2 fighters abandoned their attack entirely." Navigator First Lieutenant David Chen, serving aboard the same aircraft, corroborated Brennan's account and added critical observations about the psychological dimension. "The Japanese pilots clearly did not expect concentrated defensive fire from the forward quarter. Their previous tactics relied on our inability to effectively engage during the high-speed approach. When they encountered sustained, accurate fire from powered turrets, their entire tactical calculation changed. They could either press the attack through a wall of 50 caliber fire or break off and seek alternative approaches. Most chose to break off. Those who pressed through rarely survived to weapons release range. Statistical analysis conducted by 5th Air Force intelligence officers documented the dramatic shift in combat outcomes. During October 1943, the final month of operations with primarily B-17F models, missions to heavily defended targets in the Rabaul area experienced an average loss rate of 11% per mission, with frontal attacks accounting for 73% of aircraft destroyed. In November, the first full month of B-17G operations, loss rates dropped to 4% per mission, with frontal attack kills reduced to 28% of total losses. By December, loss rates had fallen to 3%, with only 18% attributable to frontal attacks. Japanese fighters increasingly resorted to beam and tail attacks, approaches that exposed them to the bomber's traditionally strong defensive firepower. Individual combat accounts illustrated the Chen turret's effectiveness across diverse tactical situations. Captain Thomas Harrington, piloting Devil's Advocate during a mission to Wewak on November 22, 1943, watched his bombardier engage multiple frontal attackers. Staff Sergeant William Mackenzie operated the Chen turret with devastating precision. 3 K-43 fighters attempted coordinated frontal passes from slightly different altitudes. Mackenzie engaged the highest fighter first, forcing him to break away. Then traversed to the middle attacker, achieving visible hits that caused the fighter to roll inverted and dive away. The lowest attacker, witnessing his comrade's fate, broke off his run without firing. The entire engagement lasted perhaps 15 seconds, but in that brief window, our forward defensive fire had completely disrupted a coordinated attack that would previously have posed severe danger. The technical sophistication of the computing sight contributed significantly to the turret's effectiveness. Unlike manually aimed weapons that required the gunner to estimate deflection angles and lead distances through experience and intuition, the computing sight incorporated electromechanical systems that calculated these factors automatically. The bombardier simply kept the reticule centered on the target while the sight measured range through optical means and computed the necessary deflection based on the turret's rotation rate and target bearing changes. The guns aimed slightly ahead of where the sight pointed, compensating for bullet flight time and the target's angular motion. This automation allowed relatively inexperienced gunners to achieve hit probabilities that would have required years of practice with manual aiming. Armament specialists noted additional advantages of the twin-gun installation over single manually operated weapons. Two guns firing simultaneously doubled the volume of fire and increased hit probability through pattern dispersion. If one gun experienced a stoppage, the second continued firing, maintaining defensive capability. The combined rate of fire approached 1,600 rounds per minute, creating a cone of fire through which attacking fighters had to pass. Even near misses served a valuable purpose, as the visible tracer streams communicated to enemy pilots that they were under accurate fire, often inducing them to break off attacks prematurely. Japanese fighter units responded to the Chin turret's appearance with tactical adjustments that revealed both their adaptability and the fundamental challenge the new defensive capability posed. Captain Yoshio Nakano of the 68th Sentai recorded his observations in a report dated December 1943, preserved in captured documents. The American heavy bombers now mount powered turrets beneath the nose, providing concentrated forward defensive fire. Our previous frontal attack doctrine assumed minimal forward defensive capability. This assumption no longer holds validity. Pilots attempting standard frontal approaches now face sustained, accurate fire beginning at ranges exceeding 800 meters. The twin heavy machine guns generate sufficient firepower to damage our aircraft before we reach effective cannon range. We must develop alternative tactics or accept unsustainable loss rates. Some Japanese units attempted modified frontal approaches, attacking from extreme angles or altitudes where the Chin turret's traverse limits might create dead zones. Fighters approached from 12 o'clock high at steep angles, diving nearly vertically to minimize exposure time. Others tried 12 o'clock low approaches, climbing rapidly and firing upward, though this tactic proved even more dangerous as it exposed the fighter's vulnerable underside to dorsal and ball turret fire. A few units experimented with split attacks, with some fighters approaching frontally to draw Chin turret fire, while others attacked from beam angles. These modifications achieved limited success, but required complex coordination difficult to execute in the chaotic environment of bomber stream combat. The most significant Japanese tactical shift involved increased emphasis on attacks from the rear quarters and employment of standoff weapons. Recognizing that frontal attacks had become prohibitively dangerous, fighter units concentrated on tail and beam approaches despite the heavier defensive fire from those angles. Some units received training in aerial ramming tactics, intentionally colliding with bombers after exhausting ammunition, though this desperation measure saw limited adoption. Development of air-to-air rockets and larger caliber cannon reflected Japanese recognition that closing to effective range had become too costly. The 20 mil, 30 mil, and even 40 mil cannon installations on late-war fighters represented attempts to achieve destructive hits from ranges beyond effective defensive fire. The psychological impact on both American and Japanese aircrews proved as significant as the tactical changes. American bomber crews gained measurable confidence from improved forward defense. Bombardier Second Lieutenant Frank Morrison, completing his 25th mission in January 1944, reflected on the difference. Early in my tour, flying the F model, frontal attacks terrified me. You could see the fighters lining up, know exactly what they intended, and feel helpless to stop them. The single nose gun felt like throwing rocks at a charging bull.
With the G model and Chin turret, we finally had real defensive capability forward. When fighters approached head-on, I could engage them with confidence, knowing I had the firepower to force them off or destroy them. That psychological shift was as important as the actual defensive effectiveness. Japanese fighter pilots experienced the inverse psychological effect. First Lieutenant Saburo Tanaka, interviewed after the war, described the impact of encountering Chin turrets for the first time. We had developed frontal attack doctrine through careful study and extensive practice. Our tactics worked effectively against early American bombers. Then suddenly, we faced concentrated defensive fire from powered turrets that covered the forward approach. Pilots who pressed attacks through this fire rarely returned. Those who did reported severe damage from multiple 50 caliber hits. Our commanders ordered continuation of frontal tactics, but pilot morale suffered. Everyone knew the Americans had neutralized our primary tactical advantage. We adapted as best we could, but the fundamental balance had shifted against us. Statistical analysis of Japanese fighter losses correlated with B-17G deployment demonstrated measurable impact. Intelligence assessments estimated that Japanese Army and Navy fighter units in the Southwest Pacific lost approximately 40 aircraft during October 1943 in combat with B-17 formations. In November, as Chin turret-equipped bombers entered service, Japanese fighter losses in bomber combat increased to approximately 55 aircraft, despite fewer bomber sorties being flown. By December, estimated losses exceeded 60 fighters. While multiple factors contributed to these figures, including improved American fighter escort and Japanese pilot quality decline, interrogations of captured pilots consistently cited the Chin turret as a significant factor in increasing the danger of bomber interception missions. The broader strategic implications extended beyond individual combat engagements. The Chin turret's effectiveness contributed to the viability of daylight strategic bombing campaigns in both European and Pacific theaters. Before its introduction, loss rates on deep penetration missions without fighter escort occasionally exceeded 10%, an unsustainable figure that would deplete bomber forces within 10 missions. The improved forward defense, combined with other factors, including long-range fighter escorts and improved tactics, reduced loss rates to levels that allowed sustained operations. Strategic bombing campaigns that disrupted Japanese logistics, destroyed industrial capacity, and degraded military capabilities depended fundamentally on the ability of bomber formations to reach targets and return with acceptable losses. Fifth Air Force missions against Japanese shipping and port facilities demonstrated the Chin turret's contribution to operational success. During the Battle of the Bismarck Sea in March 1943, before Chin turrets entered service, B-17s attacking Japanese convoys faced intensive fighter opposition that limited bombing effectiveness. By early 1944, similar missions flown with B-17G aircraft achieved significantly better results. The mission to Simpson Harbor, Rabaul, on January 17, 1944, exemplified this improvement. 18 B-17Gs attacked through heavy fighter opposition, with multiple frontal attacks attempted by Ki-45s and Ki-61s. Chin turret fire destroyed 2 attackers and damaged 4 others, disrupting the coordinated assault. All 18 bombers reached the target, delivered ordnance with good accuracy, and returned to base with only minor damage. The mission achieved its objective while suffering 0 losses, a dramatic contrast to similar operations a year earlier. Combat developments in the European theater paralleled Pacific experience. 8th Air Force missions over Germany encountered massed frontal attacks by Luftwaffe fighters throughout late 1943. The mission to Schweinfurt on October 14, designated Black Thursday for its horrific losses, saw concentrated frontal attacks by FW-190s and Bf-109s destroy multiple bombers before fighter escort could intervene. The arrival of B-17G aircraft with Chin turrets in November began shifting the tactical balance. German fighter pilots, like their Japanese counterparts, discovered that pressing frontal attacks against twin 50-caliber fire resulted in prohibitive casualties. Major Hans Fischer of Jagdgeschwader 1, interviewed after his capture in February 1944, provided detailed assessment of the Chin turret's impact on Luftwaffe tactics. Previously, frontal attacks from 12 o'clock high offered our best opportunity to destroy bombers before their defensive fire became fully effective. We accepted the danger of closure rates and mutual vulnerability because the bombers lacked concentrated forward firepower. When the Americans introduced the G model with Chin turrets, this calculation changed fundamentally. Approaching from dead ahead now meant facing sustained fire from twin heavy machine guns operated through computing sites. Pilots attempting these attacks suffered heavy losses. We were forced to employ more complex tactics, attacking from angles where multiple turrets could engage us simultaneously, actually increasing our danger rather than reducing it. The technical evolution of bomber defensive armament reflected ongoing analysis of combat requirements. The Chin turret represented one component of a comprehensive defensive system that included tail, dorsal, ball, and waist positions. Integration of these positions created overlapping fields of fire designed to ensure that attacking fighters faced defensive fire regardless of approach angle. Fire control systems evolved throughout the war, with later models incorporating improved computing sites, ammunition feed systems, and turret drive mechanisms. The principle established by the Chen turret that powered turrets with computing sites provided superior defense to manually operated weapons influenced all subsequent bomber designs. Post-war analysis by Army Air Force's evaluation boards assessed the Chen turret's contribution to bomber survivability. Studies compared loss rates of B-17F and B-17G models operating in similar tactical environments, controlling for variables including fighter escort, flak intensity, and target difficulty. The analysis concluded that Chen turret installation correlated with approximately 30% reduction in loss rates attributable to fighter attack. While other factors including improved fighter escort and declining enemy pilot quality contributed to overall loss rate reductions, the Chen turret represented measurable and significant improvement in defensive capability. Production challenges during Chen turret implementation revealed the industrial complexity of wartime manufacturing. Boeing, Douglas, and Vega plants each developed slightly different installation procedures, reflecting their unique manufacturing processes. Quality control protocols ensured that turrets from different suppliers met identical performance specifications. Spare parts logistics required coordination across multiple manufacturers producing turrets, guns, ammunition systems, and control mechanisms. Training programs equipped maintenance personnel with skills to service the complex hydraulic and electrical systems. This industrial and logistical effort, while invisible to combat crews, proved as essential to the weapon's success as its technical design. Maintenance records from operational units documented the Chen turret's reliability under combat conditions. The 43rd Bombardment Group's maintenance logs from November 1943 through March 1944 showed Chen turrets achieving operational readiness rates exceeding 92%, comparable to other powered turret positions. Most malfunctions involved ammunition feed issues or hydraulic system problems, both readily resolved by trained ground crews. Combat damage occasionally disabled turrets, but redundant systems often allowed continued operation even with partial damage. Armament specialists praised the design's serviceability, noting that major components could be replaced quickly, minimizing aircraft downtime. Up next, you've got two more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.